Welcome to the Society Hub podcast series at the School for Business and Society here at the University of York in the United Kingdom. Today we're focusing on what for many listeners may be a topic that they may be less familiar with, and that is a shadow management board. To help us learn more about what a shadow management board is and how it can benefit an organisation, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Kelly Devenney and Dr. Nadine Waehning. Kelly and Nadine, you're very welcome. It's great to have you both with us.
Thank you, Sinead.
Thank you for having us.
Not at all. It's great to be with you. So let's just get started, because I know many of our listeners and viewers will be really interested in this topic, particularly because many of them will be unsure exactly what it is. So Kelly and Nadine, you're both senior lecturers in the School for Business and Society here at the University of York, UK. Kelly, you specialise in social policy, and Nadine, you specialise in international marketing and entrepreneurship. But importantly, you both also hold the roles of chair and deputy chair of quite a unique board within the school here, and that is our own shadow management board. While in episode 1 we've heard about the definition, the strategic aim, and the purpose of a shadow management board, I know listeners and viewers would benefit from a recap. Can you remind us, please, what is a shadow management board?
So a shadow management board is basically, at its heart, I think, a mechanism to involve a wider range of people in decision making and to get a diverse range of voices involved in the decision making process with a senior management team or any decision making body within a school. So it's a group of people from all different parts of the school who come together once a month to meet, discuss decisions that are happening with a senior management team and to develop their own project. So they're basically a sounding board for decision making and proactively take forward projects that they want to themselves that organically emerge from those discussions of the widest possible range of people in the room.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Really helpful. Nadine, did you want to add to that?
Just a small thing. I think they're also there to sometimes offer some constructive feedback if they spot maybe something which isn't completely aligned with every voice in the room, or maybe if something was overlooked, which can happen in such a large organization.
Fantastic, really helpful. And just for the interest of transparency, I really support and agree with what you say, just as a member of the Shadow Management Board in the school, and it has been really humbling to have a process that really helps to widen out that decision making within the school, as you say. Firstly, if I can come back to yourself, Kelly, as the chairperson of the Shadow Management Board here in the school, how would you describe your role within the Shadow Management Board, particularly given the board is so unique within the University of York here in the United Kingdom?
I guess the basic function of the chair is to chair the monthly meetings to facilitate that discussion between, a diverse range of people in the school, some of whom would never have met each other before, or even really been aware of each other and each other's roles when we first set up the shadow board. So the main function is to facilitate that discussion monthly between staff and to meet monthly with the dean of the school to feedback and to discuss what's emerged from those shadow board discussions. So that's kind of the function. And but whenever I guess you're taking on a role that's new, that no one's done it before, it's difficult to know what the role is, what the scope, you have to kind of feel your way as you go along about where your role begins and ends, what you should and shouldn't be taking on. And there's a lot of administrative work behind the scenes for both me and Nadine to just make things happen. We don't have any specific administrative support attached to this board at the moment, just because of resources and not wanting to put too much pressure on administrative staff who already have a lot to do. So there's a lot of functional kind of background stuff, sorting out an agenda, sending out the minutes, keeping the log of what's being discussed, contacting external speakers. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, as well as those kind of headline sort of chairing responsibilities.
Absolutely, so a lot of hidden work that goes on so smoothly. Absolutely.
I want to just get that in so everyone knows how much hidden work we're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can absolutely second that. Thank you, Kelly. That's really helpful. Nadine, your role as deputy chair came later within the Shadow Management Board, approximately a year after it had been established. Can you tell us about your role within the board? Because it is equally important, particularly in terms of the sustainability of the Shadow Management Board. Can you tell us a little bit more, please?
Yeah, of course. I do believe that as a deputy, you're basically there to kind of catch if anything drops. So you kind of, I can work really closely with Kelly on all sorts, and she's enabling me also to kind of see what she's doing as the main chair. So in the background, when we are having meetings with the dean, for example, I can be involved more proactively now. But it's really just for sustainability, as you pointed out, Sinead, just to have a certain continuity if something does come up, because we're all human, we might fall ill. And it's basically being a bit of a glorified secretary where I can be to take some notes and help out. Not that I think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I do see the shadow board almost, or the chair, as a glorified secretary in a way, because we are gathering voices from everyone around us, and it's not about highlighting what we just believe by ourselves, but what the group does. So summarizing key opinions, and I think I'm just grateful that I can be there to support Kelly where I can and work with her together in a really good team format.
Right, and I think what's really interesting, and I agree absolutely, a secretarial role is important, but what I can vouch for, just in terms of what I've observed, is that your deputy role is much more than that. And as you said, being able to support Kelly as chair and keeping that continuity and sustainability is fantastic. If I could come to the next question, if I may. While the introduction of a shadow management board within the University of York was pioneering, it is not unique within the higher education sector in the UK. We know at least one other university has adopted the approach. Can I ask you both, was that helpful in establishing the shadow management board here in the School for Business and Society at York in England?
Yeah, I know that it was instrumental when our senior management team set up the shadow board, that they did take a lot of inspiration from other universities, other schools within the sector that had done something similar, and tried to kind of base the model on what had already been done, because they were so inspired by what was helping elsewhere. We've met with other chairs of shadow board in other universities, and that's been amazing. Other shadow boards are a decade in, so seeing where they've got to after all that time was really helpful to us to kind of, and to get advice on how difficult it can be just to find your way in the first couple of years was really helpful to us. So yeah, that's been really important, but obviously we can't just transpose one shadow board model to exactly to our situation. It's a slightly different school, slightly different things happening. So yeah, it was incredibly helpful to have that support and to have people to talk to who've been through it and can tell us how we're doing and what to expect.
Fantastic. And as you say, you can never just transpose. So it's useful to have that foundation, but then you needed to shape it to make it your own within the school. If I could move on to the next question that I'll address to you both. What have been the benefits as well as the challenges of leading the Shadow Management Board from both of your perspectives?
My experience isn't as long as Kelly, so she will definitely be able to chip in some more insights. But I think for me, the biggest challenge was initially also the biggest benefit at the same time, was getting so many voices around the table and actually being able to manage all of those. It was absolutely exciting to learn so many aspects, because we don't or I didn't realize personally, maybe everyone else did, in what kind of bubble we live in our little kind of corner of the academic bit of the school. But it was really insightful to hear about all the other opinions and other bubbles. And I do think multiple bubbles did get popped to make it one bigger one to start with. And that was also a challenge initially. But I think for me, it gave us certain motivations and drive even. I think it further cemented for me the importance of the shadow board. So there were issues around communication, which I wasn't necessarily aware of, or that certain groups get certain hours for things and others don't, but that's tied into a much more complex system. And yeah, I thought that was for me the biggest benefit, but also the biggest challenge initially, and probably continues to be so.
Really interesting, that perspective. Well, it's good to hear all of the views, but then just sort of coordinating that is interesting. Thank you. And from your perspective, Kelly?
I think that, yeah, I agree with Nadine that the biggest benefit is in bringing people together from different perspectives. For me, I think the nicest thing about it is the sort of slightly non-hierarchical nature. I know we have a chair and a deputy chair, but as Nadine said, we're mostly just trying to facilitate kind of things happening rather than, don't know, taking control of decisions. And, you know, this is a board where we have people, our professional support services staff, quite junior staff, up to a professor on the board in the same room whose voice has equal weight in that room. And I think genuinely feel that their voice has equal weight in the room. There's no a feeling that you can't speak up, or that your opinion isn't as relevant as someone else's because you're not as experienced, or you're not as senior. All those things kind of go out of the window, I hope, when we're in the shadow board meeting and everyone's voice is equally valuable and important. And I think that is the main benefit, and it's really nice. It's what I like most about shadow board. The challenges, I guess, are how shadowy shadow board can be.
Good way of putting it.
It's really hard because we don't have a decision-making function. A lot of the work we do is confidential. A lot of things we see are confidential. A lot of discussions we have are confidential. And so we're finding our way, I think, to build a relationship with the wider school, because it's not always clear what we're doing or what's happening. And, you know, doing this podcast and speaking about it here is a massive part of that, is reaching out and trying to build a relationship with everybody when you can't say a lot about what you're doing is quite difficult. But we've had to really be imaginative about what it is we do, like what is the point of us, and really think about how we can bring people in to what we're doing while maintaining the basic function, which is to have conversations and give opinions which we might not be able to share with anybody else. So that's been the big challenge for me as the chair. I don't think that's probably the same for everybody, but as the chair, the hardest thing has been working out how to communicate what we do in a way that makes sense and feels valuable. But yeah, I'm still struggling. We're still struggling with it, but we'll get there.
Absolutely, and even though it's been established for a few years, it's still a delicate path to tread. So, but certainly from my point of view, I think you both do it superbly well. So, but I know listeners and viewers will find it really interesting to be aware of that bigger picture. And I suppose you mentioned there, both yourself, Kelly, and Nadine, just about the different voices and the different representation within the board. And that brings us nicely to our next question, because many listeners and viewers may be learning about a shadow management board for the first time. So can you tell us a little bit more about the size? And you've said a little bit about the composition, different staff groupings, but maybe just a little bit more about the size of the board and its role within the wider school here at the university.
So I think we currently have 14 members of the shadow board, and the original intention was that it would reflect the size of the SMT. So, you know, not exactly necessarily, but they will be similarly sized. So we currently have 14 members, academics and professional support services staff. And we also introduced a new kind of membership, an adjunct membership, to bring in a wider range of voices still, but for staff who might struggle to find the time to be a permanent member and meet every month. And that's staff who are on, you know, things like research only contracts, who don't get any workloaded time for any kind of citizenship role and are really under a lot of pressure. So we have we've kind of tried to expand our membership in ways which doesn't make us so unwieldy that we can't do anything and it's really complicated, but to acknowledge where we knew there were gaps in representation and people within the school that didn't feel they had any other pathway to have their voices heard. So we have had to find some creative solutions for how to bring people in in different ways than just putting them on the board.
No, it sounds great, and I really like the idea about that flexibility and membership as well. Having that adjunct role is really interesting. And just for listeners and viewers, when we talk about SMT, that's our senior management team, which the Shadow Management Board shadows, just to help listeners and viewers. So just moving on to the next question. It sounds as though the board is very representative of the staff groupings within the school. Has it been an easy process to build an effective team from among the cross-section of board members? And I know you've both slightly alluded to that within the benefits and challenges, but I know listeners and viewers would find that really helpful to hear a little bit more from you both.
I can start, yeah, and then Kelly can chip in. But I do think initially it was quite tricky because, first of all, identifying who all these different groups actually are and who is able to contribute to what level. Hence, the adjacent roles we have now, I think, was a big challenge. And actually learning to understand all the differences, not just having a lot of assumption when you go into a meeting and think, yeah, why are they not here? But actually kind of understanding, oh, actually, there's certain phases in their calendar which are really busy right now, and we don't actually see that. So I do think it is a bit tricky, and I think we're still learning. So if anyone is listening right now and think, my group is not represented at the shadow board at the moment, please do reach out. That doesn't mean immediately it will be in there, but hopefully we can then reflect on it and see if there is an opportunity or we actually did miss another group. So that's always really important, I think.
Really helpful. And I think what's really relevant, just before I turn to Kelly, about what you've said, Nadine, particularly when organisations such as the school are going through a lot of change at times, you know, it happens. So, you know, having that representation is really important. Kelly, did you want to add to that point?
Yeah, I just wanted to say about the context of this very particular school and maybe why it's so difficult even to transpose a model from a different university. Is there's something very unique about the time that the shadow board emerged within this school. It wasn't that the shadow board was just new, the entire school was a new entity. You know, that a merger between two previous departments or schools, you know, coming together. So that made it an especially unique challenge. It's not just that it's a big school or a complex school, it's that some people literally had never met each other and would have never had any opportunity to know each other or what that section of the school did or what that group was about. They had, you know, we were starting from scratch, getting to know each other.
No, absolutely. It's just about that cross-section and that representation and etc. So that's really, really helpful. But I think what's really important, what you said there, Kelly, is that it wasn't just that the Shadow Management Board that we're talking about today was new. It was the whole formation and merger within the school. So we'd come from separate schools of management and social work and social policy and merged to become what we now have as the School for Business and Society. So that's really, really helpful. You mentioned a few minutes ago just about, you know, how often you meet, but I know that listeners and viewers will find it really helpful to hear a little bit more just about the cycle of meetings, how often you meet, and how that runs as well. Can you give us maybe just a few brief details around that, please?
Yeah, so we meet once every calendar month and it's a 90-minute-ish meeting. And then immediately after that meeting, the chair or the deputy chair or both of us will meet with the dean of the school to report that back. So we kind of are going round in this kind of for us as chairs, 2 meetings a month cycle. So once where we meet with the shadow board, discuss everything they want to, and then feedback. And then hopefully by the time we come back round to the next month's shadow board, we can report some progress or some information from the dean of the school by the time we've got round to that. So that we're in this kind of monthly cycle, and also I guess like an annual cycle in that we have a kind of a longer meeting once a year to reflect on how the year's gone and set goals and projects for the following year. And we write a report at the end of each year. So we've got this monthly cycle and then this annual cycle of reflection and planning for the next year.
So, and it makes sense in terms of what you were saying earlier, Kelly, just about how busy you both are in the background, given, a month comes around really quickly and there's a lot to discuss. So it's completely understandable how that business and all of that admin in the background, how much time that takes up as well. So fantastic. The current board within the school has a number of projects running at present. And while we'll hear more detail about those in episodes 3 and 4 to follow this particular podcast, how important have those projects been to the role of the shadow board within the school? Can you both say a little bit about that, please?
I can make a start. I think they were really important, or they are very important, because I do think they give us a different level of being able to communicate with everyone within the school, actually what we are all about. And also gives us a bit more of a proactive way of engaging with SMT to, again, show them the value of the shadow board. I think it's just a second leg to stand on. So on the one hand, we reviewing and revising and commenting on minutes. And on the other hand, we can choose certain topics maybe SMT is not that available for, to kind of dig our heels in and say, we have a bit of time, we have the voices from across the school, here's something we can come up with. And I think that's something we can be a lot more comfortable communicating and engaging even with the further school. So I'm really excited that we have a couple of workshops coming up run by the shadow board to kind of get everyone involved. And I think that's really crucial.
I absolutely agree. I think that's the right word, is to say we're not, we can be more proactive as a shadow board. We didn't ever want to be, and we weren't established to be, but we were very keen that we weren't just responding to someone else's agenda, not just being that sounding board, but we're able to also set agendas through our project work. And we've been able to do that with a couple of projects that are coming up. So hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate some of that impact that the shadow board has, and, as Nadine says, be able to communicate in a different way with the rest of the school.
Fantastic. And thank you both for that. And it sounds a really great way, as you said at the outset, to widen decision making and getting as many people involved in that decision making process as well through the projects. Fantastic. Can I ask you both, what are you both most proud of when you look back over the last few years during which time the Shadow Management Board has been in existence?
I think for me it's twofold. I think on the one hand, I'm super proud on how we all got together from all the different parts, and I find it really motivating to kind of keep going with things. Just kind of getting to know everyone from across the school a lot more. And the other part is really topics we can't actually communicate to the outside, where we actually had an impact in decision makings and stopped certain ideas from maybe going ahead the way they were intended initially, because we identified certain areas as a team where we're like, but these and these questions haven't really been answered yet. So we were able to hand them back over before certain projects were implemented without having addressed those potential pitfalls. Those were the ones I'm personally currently most proud of, but I can't name them.
Absolutely, because we're bound by confidentiality as well. Thank you, Nadine. Kelly, did you want to add to that, please?
Yeah, I think, okay, so I think one of the things I'm most proud of is the representation that we've managed to achieve, and it was difficult to do that, and we had to be very honest and reflective after we'd finished our recruitment about where we hadn't been able to fill those gaps, where the voices that we weren't hearing, and it would have been really easy just to go, oh well, this is us, there'll be another chance in a few years for someone to input, never mind. And we didn't do that. We really thought about it and was like, why did that happen? How did we not end up with a real representation? How have we still excluded people? What's that about, and what can we do about it? So I'm really proud that we did that, because that was not the easy route at all. And it took a lot of thinking and a lot of time and effort to try and address that. Not that we can ever fully address it, but I'm proud that we dug in and spent time on that. And again, that's time no one sees, that you can't communicate out in a bulletin, but that really matters, to kind of spend the time reflecting on that. And I guess the other thing I'm really proud of is maybe a strange one, is that I was off for a period of time recently for some really difficult personal stuff. And what I'm really proud of is that I didn't have to think about shadow board for, I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't think about it at all. I knew that Nadine would be fine. Nadine, had it all covered. And that, in fact, it sort of leads itself. We're doing the admin in the background, but it's come to such a good place that it's not like, it doesn't feel like it needs someone chugging it along. So I really like that I could just drop it as a chair, and it's one element of my work that I could just drop and not have to think about at all. I knew that I would be really well supported while I was off, and that when I got back, everything would be exactly where it needed to be. And that's kind of rare. That's kind of rare, isn't it? To just think, oh, I can just leave that, so everyone will figure it out. So I'm proud of that. It's not a thing that I've done, but it's a thing that we've established as a whole group.
And I think what's the two things come to mind. What's really wonderful about what you both said is, one, just the contribution, that both of you have made in order to get the board to that stage. But also, while we're bound by confidentiality in terms of the content of what's discussed on the Shadow Management Board, I think what you've shared is hugely reflective of the ethos within the board, that members can come and go, and the board itself continues to run in an effective way. So congratulations to you both in that regard, and thank you for sharing those details. I know it'll be really important for the listeners and viewers. There may be listeners and viewers today who are interested in establishing a shadow management board in their own organisation and in being involved with it. What words of encouragement would you offer to them?
I would just say that it will be really hard, but it's really important. And, most things that are worth doing are quite hard. So I would say, even if it seems really difficult from any perspective, that might be a manager's perspective trying to set it up, or, members of a shadow board trying to get through it, it will feel really difficult because it's new and because you're trying to figure out how something that's not an established part of a system works. And it's hard, but it's worth it. So I would just say to be prepared for it to feel uncomfortable at times for everybody who might be involved with it, and to feel unusual, but that probably means you're doing it right.
Good words of advice. Nadine, would you like to add to that, please?
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add is also there are now examples out there. So reach out. You're not alone in this. So in one aspect is reach out externally, but also have a conversation with colleagues. I was quite surprised, or I'm still always surprised, that the positive responses you get when you talk about shadow board. So actually having a chat about the worries, you're not alone with this. It's a big thing, but there are people out there.
Right, fantastic. And can I ask you both, just as I'm conscious of time and we're getting to bring the podcast to a close, what would you say are the future next steps for the Shadow Management Board? How do you see things continuing going forward?
I think we're in a phase where we're really confident in the projects that we've done and that we're doing, and how meaningful and useful they are. So I think the next stages for us are to kind of shout a bit louder about those projects and find ways to communicate what we've achieved, and to bring people in more. So that's what's coming next. I don't know what our actual projects for next year will be, but right now we're really focused on finishing up the projects we've worked so hard on this year and making sure that we can shout about them and the impacts that they've had.
I think I would just echo that, what Kelly has said, that we are really proud and excited to finish those ones up before focusing on the next one problem at a time.
Fantastic. I know that would be really helpful to listeners and viewers today. So thank you both very, very much. Our time has sadly come to an end. We do make free resources available to our listeners and viewers in the spirit of a university for public good, which is the strategic ethos of the University of York here in the United Kingdom. So listeners and viewers can find those useful free resources in the link below the recording. And you can also learn a little bit more about Nadine and Kelly if you want to contact them in relation to setting up your own shadow management board today. So all that remains for me to do is to thank both of you, Dr. Kelly Devenney and Dr. Nadine Waehning, for their insight and their generous sharing today. So thank you both, Kelly and Nadine, for being with us.
Thank you, Sinead.
Thank you, Sinead.
Just a reminder, additional information and those resources are available below. Thank you again, most importantly, to all of our listeners and viewers for joining us today. Please stay tuned for our episode 3 and 4 in the mini series about a shadow management board, in which you'll learn a little bit more about the details of our projects. Thank you all very much for being here today, and we look forward to having you join us again in the future. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.